Boys has to be one of the greatest TV series of the last decade. Beneath all the exploding bodies, political satire and absolute chaos, the show gives us some disturbingly realistic examples of toxic masculinity and how insecurity, entitlement and dominance can corrupt people to the core. Quick disclaimer before we get into it. I made this video because, like many men out there, I do not like hearing the word toxic masculinity. And it got me thinking, why? And this came up with a colleague I work with. We were discussing a film recently that's coming out in the summer. And one of the characters is apparently the embodiment of toxic masculinity. And it really got me thinking, why does this phrase bother me? I'm a decent guy. I don't behave like an asshole. So I started reading up on toxic masculinity and what it was. And a lot sat with me. Some of my behaviours in the past have not been perfect, and I have friends, former friends actually, that I've distanced myself from because of their toxic behaviours. This was years ago, it's not just recently. And this is why I'm making this video, because I want to talk about what toxic masculinity is and what it means to me and how we define it and what examples are, so that I think a lot of guys can understand now what it means to be toxically male. So before we get into it, I'm a man, and I'm not saying that all men behave like this. That's a bad faith interpretation of the discussion. What I am saying is that The Boys gives us an exaggerated example of the traits that are often associated with toxic masculinity. So grab yourself a cuppa, as I've done here, another vanilla chai, and let's get into it. Because this week here we have the last week of The Boys, and I want to take advantage of it and discuss toxic masculinity with The Deep and Homelander. Everyone's least lovable loser, The Deep. Through him, we see one of the clearest examples of toxic masculinity that the series has to offer. In almost any other circumstance, this guy would be completely forgettable. And because he has power and status and a proximity to Homelander, he clings to those things desperately because they give him meaning. The Deep is deeply insecure. And because of that insecurity, he constantly tries to project strength and superiority. We see him surround himself with expensive objects, like flashy status symbols, gaudy decor if you see his bedroom. His wealth becomes part of his identity. These things remind us that he is important, at least in his mind, because deep down he's terrified that he isn't. He knows he's not important, but I don't think he's willing to admit it. Sociologist Thorsten Veblen, I hope I pronounced that correctly, introduced the idea of conspicuous consumption, the need to publicly display wealth and status in order to gain social validation. And I think a lot of people have done this. This is not necessarily a bad thing. And later thinkers expanded on this with concepts of aggressive ostentation, or displays of wealth become excessive performance and tied to insecurity and dominance. And this describes The Deep perfectly. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with going out and showing off a flashy piece of jewellery or a new shirt or a nice car. If you've earned it, you definitely show it off. But has The Deep really earned these things? Just think about that. His cars, his house, his podcast, even the way he talks, everything's about him, and it feels like overcompensation. The word bro gets used a lot and is very alpha-esque. He constantly needs the world to believe he is powerful, successful and masculine and important, because underneath all that he feels weak and disposable. As the series progresses, he mocks woke culture more and more and refers to things as gay, as people in my generation would have done when they were like 9 or 10. And this is on his podcast again. You can see how threatened he is by anything feminine or emotionally vulnerable, and honestly, it feels a little bit like projection. Because if you look at The Deep, he himself doesn't exactly embody the hyper-masculine ideal that he worships. So you have to wonder if part of him is jealous of people that are more comfortable in their own skin. I feel like that is something with him. What makes The Deep really interesting to me is that we occasionally see glimpses of vulnerability. His relationship with his octopus lover, it is absurd at first, but it's also one of the few times we see him emotionally honest about what he wants. But under Homelander's pressure, he suppresses that vulnerability and literally destroys it by eating her. And we'll talk about Homelander and his need for dominance later. And then there's Starlight. The first time they properly meet, she approaches him with kindness and admiration, and he immediately abuses that with his power and control and coerces her into sexual acts that she does not want to do. And this one sticks with me because she openly admits that she had an attraction to him, and he was maybe a little bit flirtatious. Clarifying here, did not deserve what happened here. And in the book it's far worse. But part of me wonders, had he just actually not been a complete asshole and talked to her, there could have been something there. Probably not, because she would have discovered how shallow a person he really is. But in his mindset, he was entitled to her. There was no empathy there, and it's one of the ugliest traits that the show explores. And like I said, the book does the sexual dominance thing far worse. I think almost to its detriment. It's disgusting in every way that this would happen, and it happens in our society. But I feel like that the TV show toned it down more, which is crazy to think about, and I think that is to the show's it's beneficial, we'll say, to the show's storytelling. And in that mindset, entitlement without empathy is one of the ugliest traits that the show explores. Something which is much worse in the book. And I feel like toning it down for the show is probably for the best. And if you're watching the show and you're made very uncomfortable by these things, especially last season where Huey was the sort of Spider-Man pastiche and what happened to him was played off as a joke, yeah, the book is far worse. In fact, I feel like in many ways the show has improved on things from the book. It's worth checking out if you're interested, but overall I actually prefer the show to the book. In the show, The Deep, with his insecurity, just sucks up to anyone more powerful than him. While Homelander, by his insecurity, dominates everyone around him. Everything about Homelander revolves around power, control, and fear, and possibly breast milk. We know that he raped Billy Butcher's wife. We know that he enjoys the fact that people are terrified of him. To some extent, it's complicated, because deep down he doesn't want that. We'll talk about that. He doesn't want to be admired. He wants submission. Homelander constantly humiliates and bullies the people around him because he's fundamentally insecure. The moment someone challenges him, criticizes him, or threatens his ego, he lashes out. He has spent his entire life building the image of the ultimate alpha male, the strongest, toughest, most untouchable man on the planet. But underneath all that, he's a terrified little boy throwing a tantrum. Homelander's tragedy is very different than the Deep's. I mean, we don't know the Deep's origin at this point, but Homelander, he was abused, isolated, and psychologically broken as a child. They turned him into a monster before he even had a chance to be a person. Hell, he was actually a product before he was a person. Personally, he just needed hugged. He needed a family. What's crazy is, was it like the 80s he would have been a child, I'm guessing. So he's a little bit older than me, I'm guessing. They should have known at that point that sheer isolation was going to create this monster. Like, that's the point of the show, that people don't think about the consequences, at least one of the points. And there's real psychological studies showing that when children miss critical development milestones, particularly around trust and emotional attachment, autonomy and healthy socialization, it can increase the likelihood of emotional dysregulation, aggression, unstable relationships, and impaired empathy in later life. And if we look at Erik Erikson's 8 stages of psychological development, we can see Homelander never really had a chance. And quick disclaimer, if you have a poor relationship with your parents, or you have a young child, I do not advise looking at this, because it will make you start to question things, because it breaks down your childhood into 8 phases, and you may go, oh, mom and dad messed up at this point, or oh no, I've messed up at this point. It's fascinating. But a quick rundown. He never developed trust because every relationship in his childhood was artificial. Autonomy was never really given to him because his entire existence was controlled by scientists and corporations. So, yes, we see him leading people and all now, but do you remember when he first took over running Vault? He didn't know what he was doing, and now he just rules through fear because he doesn't actually know what to do. What's that line from the Joker? He's like a dog chasing a car. He gets it, but he doesn't really know what to do with it. So he just moves on to his next phase. And the intimacy is a big one here as well, because nobody ever truly loved him as a person. And like I said, he was never treated like a human, only a product. And yet there are brief moments when you can see fragments of what he could have been. In Diabolical, the animated series, you see Homelander's first mission when he was less jaded, and he seems to genuinely want to do this, and it's not for the right reasons. He wants to be the hero, I think, because he wants to be loved. And then there's how he comforts his own son after Becca's death. It's actually the correct way, because it wasn't his son's fault. He didn't have control over his powers, and he tells him this. And there's moments where he's just desperate for genuine affection. You can see that again with the legend, and scenes where beneath all of his rage, he just wants to be loved. And that's his tragedy. And that comes through in his relationship with his father, Soldier Boy, who again would be another example of toxic masculinity. And I do wonder with him, again, that was his terrible relationship with his father, and growing up in the 30s and 40s is probably what made him the way he is, and a rich kid at that time as well. And he seems to have potential to be good, and I'm wondering what we're going to see in Vault Rising. But back to what I'm saying. Again and again, Homelander reaches out for approval from Soldier Boy, but Soldier Boy has his own unresolved daddy issues and repeatedly swats him away, hurting him even more. For all his power, Homelander is still just a damaged child begging to be accepted. But instead of healing from his trauma, Homelander weaponizes it. As the series progresses, we see him destroy relationships with the people around him simply because they stop feeding his ego completely. Anyone who disagrees with him becomes disposable. Because for Homelander, love means obedience. And the terrifying part of that is that people keep enabling him because they fear him. So it's a vicious cycle. And he clearly has abandonment issues because he doesn't have anyone. So tie all that together, and this is why we get him being so bloody violent all the time. Like, Firecracker was loyal to him and he still killed her. the president was going to be loyal to him out of fear, and he still killed him. He didn't think about the consequences of that, so it's interesting what's going to happen in the finale, which for me will be tomorrow. The real tragedy here is that both of these characters had the potential to become better people. The Deep genuinely cares about marine life. Sometimes a bit too much. I heard he likes to sleep with the fishes, if you know what I mean.
I thought you said Troy McClure was dead.
No, what I said was he sleeps with the fishes.
And after his exile, humiliation, and even his own experience of SA, there were moments where he felt like the character might genuinely reflect and grow. But old habits die hard, and they may run deep with this one. Again and again, he falls back into entitlement, insecurity, and cowardice. Homelander is tragic because he was never really allowed to become a person at all. He was manufactured, controlled, and psychologically broken before he ever had a chance to understand empathy and connection. And that might be one of the biggest themes in The Boys. Pain doesn't automatically make someone compassionate. Sometimes it just helps create people who pass the pain on to everyone else. Because I was always taught that, younger, that, the pain leads to empathy, but it clearly doesn't. Soldier Boy and Homelander are both examples of that, even though they have little moments of it. And Billy Butcher as well, he has suffered through so much pain. And that's why I look at characters like Mother's Milk, who's, again, very different in the book, and Huey. It's quite different in the book, but the core is there. And I think to myself, that's the real heroes of this story. Frenchie as well, actually. People who have been hurt, and they channel that into being empathetic. And Kimiko too, Annie as well. Yeah, actually, the protagonist, all but Billy. It'll be interesting to see what Billy does. But so far, that's my thoughts. So, do you think I'm being a bleeding heart woke lefty when I talk about this? Or do you actually agree with me on it? Are these really toxic traits? And are you willing to look in the mirror and say, in the past, I've been this way? Because I've had some of these traits in the past too, just being an asshole. But you grow, and you can grow beyond them. We can always be better than what we are. And we're probably always better than what we were. Anyway guys, my name's David. This is the Congruent Chronicler. Thanks for sticking by. I hope you've all enjoyed this one. Again, it's something a bit different, but I want to talk about just the psychology of men because I've been enjoying this show, and I had something from my past come up recently that is it's stuck with me. It's pretty hard. It's to do with an old male friend of mine. It's definitely suffers from toxic masculinity traits. Only his issues he took out on himself, and it's something I'm trying to process, and that's part of the reason why I made this video. And I hope some of you have stuck by to this point, the after credits, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to add this bit in or not. But I need to stress that this is not all men. And from talking to women about this in the past, they will tell you it isn't all men when they say that. They know that. But hopefully we're moving forward away from this toxic stuff, because I think we deserve better than that. Because toxic assholes like these guys here, they don't just bring women down, they bring everyone down. Men and women together. And I think we forget that. On that note, I'm going to cut this off. Next week, I'm not too sure what we'll have up, because I'm going to be at MCM, so I may do something different there. But if you're at MCM, come say hi. If you actually don't like what I do, please actually come say hi. I'd actually love to talk to people about that. And feel free to comment below. And if you like what I do say here, please definitely come say hi, because I could use some praise. See you guys.